Hi everyone and welcome back to Hit Your Numbers. This week we have an extra special episode for you. We've got Jonny Coleman on the show. If you don't know Jonny, he's the Global Head of Sales at First AML. This is a really exciting episode and we hope you guys enjoy it. And before we get started, don't forget we have a 7-day free trial of the Sales University. You can sign up and get 7 days fully free of our Learn and Develop memberships. So go to therevenueenabler.com and check them out. Enjoy the show.
Awesome. All right, we've got another great episode today. So today I'm joined by Jonny. How's it going?
Hi, James. Very well, thank you. Very well.
Good. Looking forward to this conversation today. So if you're a sales leader, listen to this. We're going to jump into how to run really effective one-on-one meetings with your sellers, but also how you become a better sales coach and help develop your people to go on and become great salespeople and hit the number. Jonny's also recruiting as well. So if you're an SDR at the moment, or even an AE, go follow Jonny because I'm sure he's going to have a bunch of vacancies come up over the next couple of months, couple of years. And hopefully today in something he says will inspire you to maybe just learn a little bit more. So Jonny, maybe just for context for the listeners, maybe just give us a bit of an intro into like who you are, a bit about your background, the mission at the company, and why you're so excited about, the product you're selling, the market you sell it into, and then we can jump into the conversation.
Got you. Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, so I'm Jonny Coleman, Head of Sales at First AML. By way of introduction, my background is sales. I've been doing this for 16 years. I've always been in a complex sales environment. I started selling data and fax numbers, would you believe, back when email marketing wasn't even a thing. So that's giving an indication of my age. Most recently moved back from Australia and joined the First ML team to launch their UK business. First ML is a great company. They're on a trajectory and ambitions to be $1 billion company in a sector that is really ripe for a kind of clear leader to emerge. So in terms of industry we work in, we sell to law firms, financial services firms, accountancy firms, and also real estate, particularly commercial real estate. All of those sectors, there's not one kind of single AML platform that to beat them all, essentially, and that is what we're here to do, is to take that pole position. So if you're interested in joining a company that's on a steep trajectory with a clear path to exit and having that on your CV, yeah, should give me a call because we're on an exciting journey for sure.
Amazing. Love that. We'll make sure we put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can come and connect, follow you, and reach out and learn a little bit more. Cool. So we're here to talk about effective one-on-ones and how to become a great sales coach. Just before we jump into that, like in your view, from your perspective, what do you think separates like a really great sales leader from like an average one, like when it comes to coaching their teams?
I think frequency and delivery of coaching, I think, separates the good from the greats. There is some stats around the lack of coaching from sales managers, and I've experienced that in some of my previous roles. You kind of left to your own devices and you've got to do your own self-learning. But I think for the leaders that are coaching, it's the way in which you coach, how often you coach, and the times in which you choose to do so. I think the great leaders that I've seen do a combination of two methods of coaching. One is deliberate skill gap analysis based coaching framework. So, Jonny, you're not great at setting next steps on your call. Let's focus on this for the next 3 weeks until you get that bedded in. And then the other one is more reactive ad hoc stuff. So I find if you've got a sales manager that can point you in the right direction at the time that you've either made the mistake or not done a step, I think that tying it into the emotional situation that you're in at the time and feeling the emotions can be a really good means of ingesting or incorporating a new process into your system.
100%. The frequency one is really, really important and interesting, actually. And, when I was leading teams, I was in very early stage startups, VC pressure. I mean, we were 3 months into the pandemic. It was my very first VP role. So I felt even more pressure then. And sometimes they would take a bit of a backseat because I'd be on like 7 demos that day, managing 8 people, doing a board pack and recruiting and stuff like that. I guess the luxury we have today, and I think we need to see more curiosity in this area, is like how AI can enable us to do more coaching where you are in those situations, because the frequency part is really important. Because if you leave it too long, it can have a really significant impact on the rep and on the team and on the business, right? So getting the delivery is key, but getting that frequency in there as well so that you can catch stuff fast and then plug the gap and drive the business forward. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
100%, 100%. The frequency not to be underestimated at all, because I think it's the repetition that then beds in a new process or way of working in your mind. And like a one-hit wonder training session, it's just not going to get anywhere near into your kind of long-term memory. So you need that. You need those wheels, those repetitions to get it bedded in.
Yeah, you're talking my language. One and done training just doesn't work. Like, you're better off just setting that cache on fire and not bother doing it, because it won't change behaviors. Like, human beings and our brains are complex, so it takes time and repetition for that to happen. The bit I also like, and we might get into this a little bit later, but a lot of sales leaders think that their reps need coaching after the event. If you're going into a really big, like, late stage deal negotiation with a CFO, like, why not do some like scenario planning and a bit of like coaching before the call and be like, hey, Johnny, we're meeting the CFO of a manufacturer, like a big law firm. What objections do you think we could get on the business case? Okay, great. Let's take that first one. Let's role play that now. And then you give them the objection and see how they respond, then give them the coaching and start to build a bit of confidence in that conversation in 25 minutes. Like, how important do you see that as a strategy as well, rather than just relying on the after event?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. And it's quite often that actual act of kind of preparation and running through scenarios in role play situations that beds in, I think, that mindset of, hey, I need to prepare for this. And so what you're doing is not only coaching for that particular scenario that you're about to face, but you're also bedding in a mindset towards preparation in general, I think.
Yeah, I was interviewing one of my customers who's a head of sales on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke about like performance, like high performing sports is very similar to sales. Like, Lewis Hamilton this weekend won't just jump into his Formula One car on Sunday at 2 p.m. and go around the corner at 200 miles per hour. He'll be practicing and like in the simulator and looking at the data before it happens. So like, we should be doing the same with our sellers before going out and building pipeline. We should be coaching them on how to make a call or how to run discovery or how to build a business case. Otherwise they'll get the feedback afterwards and we've just lost that opportunity, or maybe lost that opportunity. So yeah, big opportunity there. Okay, I think we might have got into some of this, but maybe, give the listeners a bit more context. What would you say is like the biggest mistake you see frontline sales managers make when it comes to one-to-ones?
I think the biggest mistake that I've seen is having them too transactional. And so if they're just a run through numbers, like, hey, how many deals have we got in your pipeline and what are you going to close this month, and the kind of base level numbers that we look for as a sales leader, I think that's probably the biggest one that I see the most often. Is it's used as a check-in, a pipeline review, a health check on your sales performance, rather than opportunity to develop and grow both professionally, that particular individual, within the role, within the company, and also, forge a way through their career aspirations together. And I've seen it. I mean, everybody does it. I've done one-to-ones where it's just fact based and there's not a lot of meat on the bone, but I think that's probably the most common scene mistake that I've come across.
Yeah, and again, we might get into this, but like I used to, and you probably do something similar. I'll have different types of one-on-ones with reps. I'll have like a call, like bi-weekly. I'll do like a call coaching session and a deal coaching session, a call coaching session. Then I'll also have a dedicated one-to-one where I actually want to get intimate with the rep and understand like hobbies, interests, like just general checking. Like, dude, how you doing? How you getting on? Like, anything I can do to, what can I get out your way? Where's the frustration at the moment? Like, how can I remove bottlenecks? Not just, hey, I've got 15 minutes. I know we're meant to talk about your skills and things like that, but I haven't got time. What's your forecast for the quarter? And I interrogated your next steps 2 days ago on the forecast call, but any changes? Unfortunately, those things happen too often, and organizations lose great talent because people want to become great. They want to go places. And if you're not going to make me great, I'm going to go and find a sales leader that's prepared to help me. So yeah, I see that a lot.
100%. And it's also, they can become a bit obsolete, those meetings, with the technology we've got available at the moment and the dashboards that we've all got in Salesforce. I can see, I can run a health check on a salesperson's pipeline in about 30 seconds. And that then meeting becomes redundant. You're just basically covering old ground, and you're taking a salesperson away from doing sales activities, and particularly if you've got high performance team as well, you've got to make sure that those one-to-ones add a ton of value, because you're essentially pulling them away from their day job for a period of time, right? And if it's a numbers run through, then that could have been done. That could have been done over email.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. So let's talk about structure then. So like, how do you typically structure your one-to-one so that you and the rep gets maximum value and they don't just turn into a pipeline review? And like, feel free to talk about the prep as well, because I think there's a lot of good stuff, like you said there, like the prep that goes into those conversations so that you have a great conversation, not figuring things out live on the call. Like, maybe kind of give the listeners a bit of a breakdown there.
Yeah, so the way that I approach my one-to-ones, like we use Notion here, and I've got a Notion page for each salesperson that we then document everything we've covered in that weekly one-to-one. The page itself is managed by the salesperson. And so I set it up initially for week one, and then they just kind of copy it and delete kind of elements here and there. What I always ask both parties to do, and I'm including me in this situation, is both be prepared for the one-to-one. Because if you both do your responsibility or execute on your responsibilities well, you can have a really good period of time together. If one of you doesn't come to the table on that, you end up having to go through the motions and understand the baseline information. So preparation is absolutely key. In my kind of one-to-one structure, I detail a number of kind of key things in there. So I've got like a template that I use, which is like all the basics, you know, how you track into to quota, how you're pacing for this quarter, open pipeline, all that kind of metric stuff. I know I can see that in Salesforce, but I like to encourage salespeople to actually take it out of Salesforce and create a separate document, because there's something that happens in your brain, I think, when you do that, where there's an element of ownership that comes in, there's some clarity that comes out of it as well. So that's kind of baseline. Pipeline, close one, tracking, pace, etc. I then have like a bit of an open forum session, which is typically like, what's working well this week? It's two questions. What's working well? What's not working well? And the idea of that is to encourage them to reflect on a weekly basis. Hey, what did I do last week? What worked well? What didn't I do? What can I remove from my process? And it feels like I'm kind of teaching people to suck eggs here with kind of having a framework like that, but it's not necessarily about that information. It's what I alluded to earlier, James, which I'm trying to build the behaviours that contribute to success, and reflection and owning your numbers and being really, really clear on where you're at. It is absolutely paramount. In addition to that, I also make sure that I am well across all the numbers. So that's my preparation. So I make sure I know absolutely everything about their pipeline, the deals, what we need to discuss this week. So my preparation is also to come to the table. So one, I can also sense check the numbers that they put in and just kind of steer the ship a little bit. But two, I'm also coming in at a more progressed state, and I can have a more progressed discussion, essentially. There's a couple of other things that I do in my one-to-ones as well. So I use questioning. So there's kind of two ways that I kind of integrate coaching into my kind of weekly routine. One is direct coaching, one is indirect. Indirect is basically using effective questioning to help the salesperson uncover their own skill gaps and their own areas of development. And I run my one-to-ones much like I would a discovery meeting in front of a client. It's using kind of open-ended broad questions and then narrowing down to the areas that I think the skill gaps are. And what I'm trying to do there is get the salesperson to uncover their own areas for improvement, because if they can land on it themselves without me saying, Jonny, you need to get better at setting next steps, again, ownership there, because they've come to the conclusion themselves. And if you have ownership, you're more likely to see it through to completion, I guess. So effective questioning is kind of how I roll into phase two. And what I'm looking for is skill gaps in their sales process, essentially. What then comes out of that, when you've identified an area of improvement, and this is probably a theme that's going to come up a couple of times, James, in today's conversation, but develop a mutual action plan. You have to have something written down with, hey, how are you going to solve that problem, Jonny? Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to research how to set next steps, and then I'm going to try and implement it 3 times this week. And then the critical bit is, how are you then going to inform your sales leader if it's been effective or not? And usually what you're trying to do as a sales leader is minimize the amount of actual oversight they have to give. What you want your salespeople to do is email you at the end of the week and go, hey, Jonny, I put some next steps in place with my 2 clients this week, and it worked really, really well. And so, but developing a mutual action plan where you both kind of buy in to what the fix for the problem is going to be is absolutely critical, because if not, you're just identifying problems, and it's not going any further other than recognizing there's a problem.
Spot on. And don't worry about like the whole teaching people to suck eggs things. Like, I think that's what we need. Like, the reason I run this business is none of us gets a degree in B2B sales. I definitely went 15 years without proper formal training and coaching. I made a load of mistakes. And then when I became a sales leader, I got even less, and the mistakes are way more expensive. So hopefully this is going to be super helpful content for people that are just stepping up into frontline managers, or they're like me where they got very little leadership training and coaching, and they've maybe been a leader for 5 or 6 years, and they're hitting their head against the wall because they just can't get their team to move the needle. So yeah, like, talk about the basics, talk about the advanced stuff. I kind of wrote down here like a bit of like an operating system, it sounds like. So the rep runs the numbers. I'm a big fan of that. Like, reps should be very self-aware. When I left my last job to start this business, I felt a little bit guilty because I built great relationship with the reps. But my point of view with a lot of this stuff is I should be able to retire myself to a degree. And the only way I can retire myself if my reps are very self-aware and they see the problem, they look at the business through the same lens that I do. And it can take time for them to do that. But your goal has to be when they rock up to that one-on-one, they go, right, Jonny, I looked at the data, I listened to this call, I know exactly what you're going to say, didn't set next steps. And you're going to say, yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I was prepared to talk to you about. Okay, cool. What do you think we can do to overcome that? Build the plan. And then, like when we're selling, we're talking about metrics and outcomes. It's the same thing. How do we know we're starting to move the needle here? Well, I'm going to see 7 out of 10 of my opportunities with locked in next steps inside a Salesforce. Great. Sounds like we've got a plan. Let's go execute. How can I help?
100%.
Like, it's just a simple system and structure that you're running, right? And then you just repeat it.
That's it. Make it repeatable. It makes it easier. You actually said something really interesting there, James, which was, how do I retire myself? And I think that as a sales leader should be what everyone is striving towards. And it is how to make my role completely redundant in this organization. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, right? Because it's your career path, etc. But that should be your main objective. Make this team run without me anywhere near it. And that's, and I think if we all moved forward with that kind of front of mind, yeah, it'd be a lot better place for everybody.
100%. And if you join the right organization like yours, where it's, they've got massive goals, you can retire yourself with, let's say, an SMB team that can tick along, bring in a leader, maybe promote from within, keep a close eye on it. You can go and figure out another big problem to go and solve, which might be breaking into mid-market in, APAC. And you literally probably take a very similar playbook, maybe swap out some of the variables and go and deploy it over there, and then run that thing, right? And then 6 months, 12 months later, so you're not going to retire yourself completely, but from those reps, if you're talking about the same thing 6, 9, 12 months down the road, you've either hired the wrong people, or the way that you're coaching is probably more like telling them what to do, not helping them figure it out, right? So I thought you nailed that. I'm guessing as well, part of your operating system and your plan with this is, I wrote down, you've probably created a culture that feels very safe to raise their hand and say, hey, I just don't get it. Like, I'm really struggling. Like, I need some help. I'm listening to the calls. I'm in Gong. I can't spot where it's going wrong. Can you just give me some feedback? And they're like actually seeking feedback because they know their boss isn't going to put them on a pip
100%.
because they've asked for help. I guess that's important to you.
Yeah, well, when you asked what's one of the biggest mistakes I see sales leaders make, it was a real coin toss between what I mentioned and what I'm about to mention now, and it's that creating of a safe environment. I've seen this a million times where sales leaders will come into a coaching scenario and they'll come in with some kind of opening statement like, "This is what I used to do and it worked really well," and what it does is, I get what they're doing. They're trying to showcase that this works and you should take it seriously. But what it's actually doing is elevating them and putting them slightly on a pedestal. And when you're the person in the room that's like, "Oh my God, I don't do that," you're much more reluctant to then put your hand up and say, "I don't do that," because you look inferior. And so creating an environment of openness and trust is absolutely key. It's paramount to absolutely everything, I think. I often, and you'll hear it from my team if you ever meet them, James, but I often start a lot of my conversations with, "This is a mistake I made," and I go into specifics so they can tell that I'm being truthful, and I think that's a really, really good way of showing that you're human, and just flipping the script a little bit rather than saying this worked for me. Say I used to do this and it didn't work, and this is what happens. And I think it's that kind of showing of vulnerability and hey, I'm human too, and I've made mistakes too. It's that builds the safety net around your team, I think.
1,000,000%. Before you even spoke about mistakes, and you were talking about that, like about elevating yourself, I wrote down that resonates with me. So when I joined Staff Circle, which was a HR tech business, like 3 months into the pandemic, VCs, never been a sales leader before, wanted to do great things. And we went from like 12 customers to 175 customers. And the early deals I was responsible for because I was really the only salesperson while they had a VP title. As I built the team out, the mistake that I made was I built a HubSpot dashboard, and I was like, look, can you see my win rates of like 70%? And like, I've closed them out of business and stuff like that. And I thought that's the right thing to do to like sell them on the mission and coming here and stuff like that. And I just created this team of people that was just like, shit, that dude's elite. Like, what if I ask him like a really super quick? I was like, wow, what a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, as I had to rebuild part of the function, I was like, learning. I need people to be able to raise their hand confidently and say, I've spotted a problem. Here's a bottleneck. I can't do this. Can you help me? Rather than keeping it internally and then going on with that struggle.
100%, and it then becomes really hard if you have a team that can't put their hand up and say, "Hey, James, my discovery meetings are crap." It means that you have to diagnose every single problem as a leader, rather than having them self-diagnose, which is like, just put my hand up. Hey, I can't set next steps. Can we do a few sessions on that? And it's the latter that you want, right? You want someone to be able to be self-aware, so you're not having to review every single meeting and point out what was good and bad. You want them to have that awareness, but then also you want them to stick their hand up and say, I need some training on this, and then feel like there's no repercussions from doing so.
And that's the key, is the repercussions. It's okay to ask for help. I want you to be great. I need you to help me help you, kind of thing. I can't be everywhere. I think that's so important. And I love, just before we jump into the next question, I took so many notes on that, just that one last question, but I love that you spoke about, I run them like a discovery call. I wrote down, I guess you ask very intentional questions that gets the rep to think about the problem, and that requires you to come prepared. It's like when you do a discovery call, you listen to a rep's call, and some of the feedback you might give them is, we actually asked, like, 1 minute we were talking about armchairs, and then we were talking about oranges, and then we're speaking about the color of the sky. It's very confusing for the buyer. Like, be very intentional with your questions. I guess that's what you're doing with the rep, is you know where you need to lead them down the path. It's a bit like leading the witness, right? And you want them to come to their own conclusion. You just need to help them get to it. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. You've got an idea, or you may have, you may know explicitly what the problem is, but you don't want to just come out and say, I think this is a problem, for all the aforementioned reasons. You need to get them to come there themselves, and you do it like similar, like you would a discovery. You start really broad, and then you come really narrow and down to, you don't have a next step in the diary, and you kind of use questioning to let them come there. But yeah, 100%. Start really broad, lead the witness, and hopefully end up in the same place, which is Jonny needs to train how to do next steps.
Yeah, discovery is two-way, right? I think, again, we forget that when we're selling. Our job is to discover around like a problem and impact and qualifications. Also for the prospect to discover for themselves the cost of the problem, and should they prioritize this, and should they think about the actual root cause and align it back to our differentiate. It's for the rep. I need to discover where the rep's going wrong, but I need the rep to also do that self-discovery piece. Otherwise, coaching turns into me telling them what to do, and they don't learn from that. It just doesn't stick.
If someone tells you you're doing something wrong, the chances of you taking that on board and then fixing that are pretty small, because you're going to be defensive, right?
I know it is. I'm not earning the money I want to earn, dude. I know this. Yeah. I'm looking for you for the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So helping them get there themselves, I think, just have a ton of benefits, and definitely the way forward.
So for the listeners then, Jonny, if you've got any like go-to questions that you typically, I know it's all very situational, reps have got different skill gaps and things like that, and your questions are intentional, so they're very bespoke to the rep and the context, but any good ones to like kick off a coaching session with a rep?
Any good ones to kick off? I guess I always start with self-analysis. That's always my first question. How do you think that call was? How do you think that meeting was? I'm encouraging the rep to kind of self-diagnose. So I always start with that. So I want to know, where they're at, like where their head is at in terms of their performance, and are they analysing it correctly, and that also can provide some coaching areas for me. I then use like open-ended questions to kind of understand kind of where they think they should focus and where they spend their time. When I land on a problem, or my sales rep and I land on a problem, and we think it's the problem that we should be solved, I then use like a series of questions, to kind of get further buying, but also then start to pave the way for the mutual action plan, which is confirmation that this is a problem. Do you think this is the number one problem we should be talking about today, or is there something else that I've missed? So I'm getting confirmation on that. I get them to conceptualize what they think they need to do to solve the problem. You can see a theme here. I'm getting them to kind of come to the table, and if they land on, let's do 3 training sessions on next steps, I'm like, great, we move into it. But if they don't land on there themselves, then I might have to steer the conversation quite well. But I think if I was to give one tip for a sales leader who's running a coaching period, end your coaching sessions with this question, which is basically around accountability, which is this: James, what do you feel is an effective way to let me know how you're tracking with getting better at doing next steps? And what I'm looking for there is to go, hey, Johnny, why don't I try and implement it this week, and I'll email you on Friday and let you know how it goes. Brilliant. What I'm doing there is I'm shifting ownership from me having to check in next week on, are you doing next steps, to James, what works for you to let me know how successful your evolution has been. That'd be my number one tip, I think.
That's such a great question. Like, if we could just bottle that one thing up, that's unbelievable, because it then sets up the next step, which is they're going to go away and do it, and we've got a plan and they need to follow through with it. And I guess one of my characteristics I always used to recruit for is around accountability. So if they don't follow through on that, come Monday morning, it's like, hey, dude, you said you were going to do this on Friday. What happened? Right. And if you start to see a pattern and a trend over time, maybe that rep isn't very accountable. And depending on your context, that might be really critical for the rep's success.
Yeah, 100%. And it showcases kind of some of the more behavioral things as well, isn't it, in someone? And they may need some coaching on actually how to take a new concept and implement it. And I think a bit of a red flag area, though. I think if there's been a mutual action plan and it's not been implemented, I think that's a sign of something slightly deeper.
Yeah, especially when it's on them. Like, they're not like you're doing a mutual action plan with a customer and it's like they're partly accountable for it as well. Like, this thing is just solely down to you, and you at least need to follow through and say, Friday, got so close. 8 out of 10 times I did it. The 2 times I didn't was for these reasons. No excuses. Next week it'll be 10 out of 10. Watch this space. Cool. I'm all good for that. Yeah. Again, but you got to create a culture to make people feel okay to say, excuse my language, I shit the bed. These are the reasons why. No excuses. Won't happen again. Watch this space.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Culture is absolutely everything in all of these interactions, because if you don't have that, you're paddling upriver essentially.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And like, eventually I started to get some advice from people around like running the coaching session, and very kind of senior experienced person said to me, if you treat it a bit like you're saying there around discovery, like when I teach discovery early in the sales process, talk about PRI, problem, root cause, impact. If I can get to that pretty quick, and I can understand, like, is this going to move fast? Is there a real op there? So if you think of it as a sales leader, what's the problem? Get them to identify the problem. But most importantly, get the rep to land on the root cause.
Yeah, 100%.
I probably know the root cause because I'm looking at the data. I'm in Gong listening before the call because I want to come prepared. I'm leading him down the track, or her down the track, to, I think what's happening is I'm not qualifying in the right accounts because I'm not asking the right questions. I'm not asking the right questions because I'm just literally jumping from call to call and there's no prep. I'm like, cool. So what do you think we can do to build better questions that are more bespoke and aligned to the business so we drive a better outcome? What do you think we should do? I should probably do better pre-call planning. Got it. Where do you think we should look? What do you think we should look for? What are we looking for before we jump into a call? Great. Got any discovery calls this week? Yeah, I've got 4 over the next 3 days. Great. Can we make a plan here that you're going to do this for those? And then maybe on Friday, you'll send me the call recordings, or maybe just, send me over the call plans and I can take a look at them, give you some feedback. Yeah, okay, sounds great. Again, you're just doing a discovery, and most sales leaders got promoted for being a good rep.
Yeah.
So no
Right,
wizardry to this.
yeah, like root cause is is fundamental to discovery, and it's fundamental to this as well. To this scenario as well. You need to understand why they're doing some. Have they got some kind of hesitation around discussing pricing? Do they feel is there something in their mindset around pricing that you need to evaluate? So yeah, getting to that kind of root cause analysis is absolutely key, because yeah, there's a ton of reasons why someone might not be setting next steps. They might feel like it's too pushy and they don't come across like a salesperson, or they may just be missing it altogether. So yeah, really, really well put, James.
Yeah, I think this is where like a lot of sales leaders probably get it wrong, and I probably was guilty of this as well, where you do more telling because you're the expert at sales, but that's not your role in the coaching session. Telling them what to do doesn't stick. You need to make them self-aware. So, like, what do you think leaders can do to avoid falling into that trap of just jumping in and telling James what to do versus actually getting me to come up with the? I know you mentioned asking good questions, but is there anything else that leaders can do to overcome, avoiding into that trap?
Yeah, I mean it's self work. Is that it's work on your own perception of yourself and your role, basically. So a lot of that stuff is internal, and you need to kind of land on what your role actually is, and where the value comes for salespeople. And then once you've got there, which is like I'm a coach, and being a coach is very different to being a boss and telling someone what to do, essentially. Once you've landed on that shift, it's just repetitions again, James. You just need to build in some habits. So your first question is, what do you think you should have done in that scenario, James? Rather than, hey, James, you should have set next steps. And it's the repetition that then builds that habit, which then becomes automated. So mindset shift from boss to coach, and then build in some kind of habit, which is first question should be something completely different. Like, what do you think, James?
100%. If anyone's listening to this that's a techie and you want to partner up, there's probably a massive opportunity to build a gong for leaders, right? Because you hit the nail on the head. Like when we have our reps record their calls, it's so we can coach them, and we need to have the reality, right, rather than the opinions. But as sales leaders, we jump into a call, we're back to back, maybe we're not prepared, and we have a bad conversation, but there's no scorecard that goes with that.
Mm.
Like maybe there's some tech out there that can help, but if not, maybe there's an opportunity in ChatGPT. It wasn't there when I was a leader, but I've been building custom GPTs now for 10 months, like Discovery Coach, where you drop a transcript in, it uses my coaching scorecard, scores the call, takes emotion out of the conversation. It's all based on data and facts, so we can't argue with it, and then builds a coaching plan. I wonder if there's an opportunity for leaders, and maybe you've done this, but you can take a recording from a coaching session for you as the leader and drop it into AI and say, hey, here's a transcript of me trying to coach one of my reps who's really struggling. Like, how would you rate my approach? Did I do lots of talking? Did I do lots of like really direct telling of what to do? Or did I really open them up and get them to really think about the problem? And did I guide them? And did I build a plan? And if you've got 10 reps and you're doing that once a week, chuck it into AI and have AI surface it.
That'd be magnificent. You mentioned at the start of the call, like often as a sales leader, you step in, you don't get a sales leader handbook, do you, when you step into the role? And I think having something that can evaluate our performance, yeah, similar to what we used to get when we were at ICs, would be wonderful. It'd be really nice.
Yeah, I think we'll get there at some point. I do see it starting to become a little bit more serious. Like, obviously, Gong and that whole market's exploded. And I know there's a couple of vendors now that are building a similar one for recruitment. So when you're recruiting people, it records your hiring managers and then gives them feedback on, are they asking the right questions? Are they asking the same questions to everybody? Are they really digging in? So there's no doubt someone will eventually build something that helps managers become great leaders. But for now, if you're listening and you're a new manager and you've got nobody to lead into, maybe start recording them and then drop them into AI and get AI to give you some feedback. It's better than nothing. It might spot something really obvious that you're just not doing, and it could make all the difference between you building a great team and maybe just struggling and getting burnt out and being fired and moving on to the next one and not realizing what the problem is.
100%.
Let's talk about feedback then. So from your perspective, like, giving tough feedback can be tough at time, right? And you just got to do it effectively, otherwise it can really damage morale, can really kind of burn relationships. Like, what's your advice to anybody listening to this on how to give feedback to a rep? How do you set it up? How do you deliver it? How do you follow through on that? Got any advice to the listeners?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, it all starts with culture, right? You need to build the environment where direct feedback is not only accepted but welcomed. That is phase one. It needs to be a situation where people give each other feedback quite openly and honestly, and it's not as hard to do as it sounds. All you need is a couple of senior people publicly giving each other feedback and then receiving that really well to kind of set the tone. I'm making that sound quite easy. There's a little bit more to it, but that's the kind of start of the framework. When you deliver, when I deliver negative feedback, I still use the shit sandwich. You say something.
Yes.
I think that is magnificent. Honestly, I know it's been around for forever, but I just think it's a really nice way to kind of deliver some negative feedback. You say you did this really well, Johnny. That not very well, and then you finish on the good, and then you can hone back in. I will die on that hill. I think it's a wonderful way to deliver negative feedback for sure.
I agree. And it's tough receiving it. And sometimes you need to hear it, but sometimes you don't want to hear it because we're emotional beasts, right? Especially in sales, right? We want to be successful. It's tough out there. And you just need to package it up right. And again, I've been on the receiving end. I've probably given it early in my career without really knowing what I was doing, and probably upset some people and probably didn't have the impact I was looking to. So I think it's really important. And yeah, I know this isn't the actual saying, but I prefer it. If it's not broken, don't break it. If the shit sandwich works, use the shit sandwich. Like if it's effective, then roll with it, right? Just conscious of your time, I've got two kind of other questions. So you mentioned earlier about skill gaps.
Yeah.
It's something that I think is our biggest problem in B2B sales. I don't think it's the tech stack in sales. I don't think it's the market's unfair to us, budget's not available. I think actually none of us really go to university and get a degree in sales. I don't have one in building pipeline or managing pipeline. We've figured it out. So from your perspective as a leader, managing a team, how do you identify specific skill gaps at the rep level? And then let's say you notice like 3 or 4 major ones in me. How do you pick the most important one that's going to have the biggest impact? And then what do you do from that point?
Oh, that is a great question. I mean, there's only one way to identify skill gaps, James, as you know as well as I do, and that is to be in the trenches. And you have to witness it. You have to read through transcripts. You have to be in meetings with clients. You have to watch gong recordings, and you have to see it for yourself. And that is literally the only way I've seen it been done on a one-to-one level. You can use data to inform your initial assessment, I guess, but then you need to go in and actually see it playing out in real time. Data is a really good way to do that because depending where they're at in the funnel and what your steps are and etc., you can start to identify where it's falling down. But you need to then go in actually and physically see it. 'Cause it could be a number of problems. It could be they're not saying this, or it could be that they're actually saying it in the wrong tone, giving the wrong impression, and there's quite a lot to sales, isn't there, once you kind of get into it. So how do I prioritize the ones that are going to have the most impact is a really interesting topic. I guess it falls down to the analysis on the data originally, and it's like where is James having the most problems? Is it falling down between discovery meeting and proof of concept? Is it falling down between demo and proof of concept, or discovery and demo? And what I understand is where in his process he needs the boost, the performance boost, and I address that one first. If you've got 50 meetings that have had a discovery meeting and no one's coming back and confirming your demo meeting, obviously that's a very, very clear sign that you're doing something in your discovery meeting that's not keeping people excited. So using data to identify what's going to have the biggest impact, but you've got to get in the weeds on this stuff.
100%. I didn't come up with this name, but there's a classic movie called Ride Along. I don't know if you've seen it. I think they made a couple of them, but he basically, I think Ice Cube's a police officer and Kevin Hart's just like some random dude, and his partner's like, "Hey, go ride along with Ice Cube," and so that's where I got the name from. But what I used to do with my reps, if they were going through like a series of really struggling, I'd actually block a whole morning off or a whole afternoon off, and I would go and physically sit next to them, and I would ride along as they do the job. So let's take an SDR. Really struggling, putting all in the, the right, inputs, making loads of calls or whatever, but just not figuring it out. I'd sit next to him like, dude, imagine I'm not here. I'm literally here to see if there's 1 or 2 things that you're doing that I can't see with data and see if I can help you overcome them because I genuinely want you to be successful and I just can't figure it out right now. And I'll sit there like taking notes. I won't interrupt them. I won't break them down or whatever. I'll take my notes. Usually I'll find a problem pretty quick. And then I'll sit them down after and said, "Hey, look, I noticed this. These are the things you need to keep doing. This is really good. Like, your shit sandwich. I want to reinforce good behaviors." And then I'm like, what I notice is you're not actually like segmenting your list very well. So what I noticed when you started cold calling is you just started calling randomly. How about we prioritize mobile numbers first, then direct dials, and then those horrible gatekeeper conversations? Because you'll get into some successful conversations fast, build some confidence, book the odd meeting, and then you'll go through your list with like, walking around like Conor McGregor, like you're super confident, and you'll find that transfer of energy will help you book some more meetings. And like sometimes it's just watching how people operate.
Yeah.
But we have to be in the trenches, like you said. Otherwise, we'll never really figure it out.
Yeah, you can't do this in spreadsheets. You've got to be in the mix.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that I really like, and you nailed this as well, is like using some data and then getting in the trenches. So before we kick off programs, we'll do like a win-loss analysis. We'll attach skills to like bad areas of those outcomes, and then we'll run it through our AI model, and it'll start to predict like these are the 3 reasons why you win. These are the 3 reasons why you don't. When you've engaged economic buy, you win this number of times. When you don't, you lose. So we use the data to like kind of point us in the right direction. So we want some speed, velocity, and then we're like, cool, give me access to Gong, get my headset on. I'm going to listen to these specific moments because the data is pushing me in that direction. And then we can go and build a training and a coaching program for that seller or that cohort of sellers. Otherwise, what happens is, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it used to drive me mad is I'd get some training on like cold calling, but I'm booking meetings left, right, and center on the phone. I'm actually just really struggling to build a quality business case. But you now put me through like 3 hours of cold call training, and I start to switch off and lose confidence in the program. And when we get to that part, I'm like, this whole thing's just a waste of my time, because we've not actually grouped people into cohorts where they've got skill gaps, and it's just a waste of time and effort.
100%. It's and that's why the manager position, I think, is absolutely critical in a business, because they're the ones that, it's not a group coaching session. It's Jonny and James figuring out how to write a compelling business case together, which is James's next advancement as a salesperson. And you have to have that, because it's the only way that you can deliver that personalized coaching to individuals. And group coaching is great, but like you say, you cover a lot of old ground when you're in a group, because people are at different levels and they've had different tenures and etc. So
100%. And there's a book that comes to mind. I don't know if I got recommended, if you've ever heard of it, but I think it's called The Sales Manager Survival Guide. It's white. It's got like a Swiss Army knife on the front. It's very old school. Like that's where I just learned how to do anything in sales or sales leadership. And I think the front cover just hooked me. And I read it. It's very textbook, but oh boy, some of the stuff in there is gold.
Yeah. I read
really good.
Sales Leader by John McCann. I thought that was brilliant. Is it John McMahon?
Yeah. Qualified Sales Leader.
Yeah, Qualified Sales Leader. That's it. I thought that one was brilliant.
Yeah,
I'll have a look at that. I don't think I've just Googled it. I don't think I've read that one, James.
It's old school, but it's honestly, and you're experienced leader, so like a lot of it would be probably just reinforcing the basics. But like anyone that's listened to this that's new into sales leadership, that thing literally is like a textbook. I learned a lot from that one book. It was like 12 quid or something.
Wonderful.
Bonkers.
I'm going to buy it after this call.
Yeah, it's good. All right, look, lots of gold. I've taken like 3 pages of notes here, but one last question for you before we wrap up. If you had like one golden rule for running one-to-ones, like with your younger self, think like your first one-on-one that you're going to deliver, what would that kind of golden rule or bit of advice be for you back in the day?
I'm going to try and give you something new, James, because I think probably the golden rule for me would be a mutual action plan. And
okay,
maybe the overarching statement is treat it like a discovery meeting. If I'd have known that when I first started running them, I'd have done them a lot differently. And obviously, running them like a discovery meeting and a mutual action plan is very sales landy, and that would probably be my piece of advice. But I'm going to give you one more thing that I wish I'd have done earlier in my career as a leader, and that is generate some kind of mutual agreement before I even commence my one-to-ones. So what I've started doing now is listing out the commitments, my commitments and my salesperson's commitments. And day one, when we start working together, I say, these are my commitments. I will turn up on time every week. I'll never cancel your one-to-one. Like, that's never going to happen with me. You're never going to, all the rest of that kind of commitment stuff that I do as a sales leader. But also, I list out their commitments to me as well. And their commitments are like, I am going to turn up prepared to the meeting, and I'm going to manage my own time effectively. And if I've got a problem, I'm going to be verbal about it. And if I'm if I'm slightly off my number, I'm going to work a little bit harder during that period to kind of catch up. And that, what I find that does is it sets a really good tone. Because I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this for you, Johnny. But what I need, if we're about to embark on this relationship, is you to do some things for me as well. And what I do now, I've created a page in Notion, and I talk through it in my first interaction with the new salesperson, and then I keep those commitments front and center. And yeah, I think if you both act accordingly in that situation between a salesperson and their manager, if you both do your jobs, do your roles, it makes the whole thing work really, really well. If one of you doesn't, it falls down immediately. So that'd be it.
1,000,000%.
Have a mutual agreement in place. Whether you want to sign a document, I don't know. That might be overkill, but at least have the conversation about expectations.
But almost that level where it's like, this is locked in, guys. Like me and you now are going to make a commitment for the next 5 years or whatever we're going to work together. These are the standards that we're going to hold each other to, and it's okay to call each other out. And if you can't take the feedback from the rep, then you're probably in the wrong job, because you shouldn't be giving it if you can't take it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And that's it. That's what they're there for, right? You're there to be called out. Like if you keep cancelling your one-to-ones with your salesperson, like you've made a commitment to that person to invest in their development, and you should be called out. And that's what they're there for. That's to lay a set of rules and principles for the engagement.
Exactly. I wrote down, you should never no-show them. I was literally just interviewing an SDR on a different topic, and I was like, you should never book over a power hour, because if you do, then you lose the value in it. And you should never book over a one-on-one, because you send a signal to the rep. You never see it this way as a leader.
1,000,000%. Awful.
You send a terrible signal.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
That my actual line is, I will never ever cancel our one-to-one meeting, but you can cancel it whenever you want. Like if you've got 100 grand deal and you're like, not today, Johnny. Like it's your time, it's your development, it's your thing. You cancel it whenever you want. But I will never move it. It sends the wrong message. I won't even prioritize a client meeting over it. They come first and foremost. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more. The other thing I'd add to that around that mutual agreement bit is, again, I got some lucky bit of advice, but get the rep on day one to write their job description. Get them to write it so they have like full confirmation on what is expected of them. And obviously a coaching moment is giving some feedback around, actually there's a few errors here, and then redo it every 6 months with them if they fall off track. Because sometimes, like especially in startups, they move at a million miles per hour, the goalposts change, the strategy tweaks a little bit. Sometimes you just need to reinforce, dude, like I think you might be saying yes to too many people internally. Like you need to say no internally more. That's a massive leadership lesson I wish I'd learned a long time ago. Start saying no more. Otherwise, you get pulled into stuff with no agenda. 3 hours later, you're like, well, that was a waste of my time, and it's not helped me hit the number. But my job's on the line if we don't hit the number, So just like learn to stay in your lane, stay true to what, keeps you in your job, fuels your compensation plan, grows the business. Anything that kind of gets in the way that you don't have time for, just learn to say no.
That is such a good piece of advice, James. I'm going to implement that and get people to describe what their job role is. Because like you say, in startups, when it's chaotic, you end up writing some content for an email newsletter, and then over time you can start to feel like that's your job, isn't it? But it's not your job. Yeah. That's in addition. I think that's a really good tip. I'm gonna take that one, James, and implement that into my.
Such a simple one. Take them half an hour, right, in a Google Doc, and then just like save them, and then there's good reinforcement for when people come off track.
I'll email you Friday when I've implemented it and let you know how.
Yeah, amazing, fantastic. Yeah, if you don't, then it'll be a pip on Monday. Awesome. Anything else you'd add before we wrap here?
I think one thing that I will just touch on, and it's about coaching, is the way in which you do it. I won't kind of go too far into it, but there's two phrases that I think are really, really important. One is myelination, and one is andragogy. And I think if you're a sales leader, have a look at those two concepts, because they helped me no end with developing how I deliver training. And it's basically like a framework to get a new concept into somebody's brain. Really, really key. Go down a bit of a rabbit hole on that, because it will yield dividends without a shadow of a doubt.
Amazing. That like turned into a masterclass. I mean, we could probably sell this podcast episode. It was that good. That was really awesome. I took so many notes. Thanks so much for going into detail. And again, like we said at the beginning, if you're an SDR listening to this, Johnny's hiring. Hopefully that demonstrated that he can clearly articulate all those things. So you'd be investing in a good sales leader that's going to invest in you, help you become more self-aware and become a better salesperson, which it's just tough to find out there. So I hope everyone got some value from that. Jonny, thank you so much for your time, and I think we'll definitely get you back for another episode because I think there's so much more we could have spoke about there.
Yeah,
so,
thank you, James. Thanks for inviting me. It's been wonderful, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Awesome, sounds good. All right, guys, thanks so much for your time. I'll see you on the next episode.
Take care.